Chapter 1. The Pattern Seekers in the Decimal Realm. Bright, sky-wide, and feather-stirred, lived creatures of plumage and song. They built their cities among clouds shaped like questions, and named their children after numbers, as if to remind themselves that everything had a place. In this realm, numbers were more than symbols. They were stories, echoes of meaning, passed from beak to beak. 3 was a young girl with downy wings, the shade of morning mist, and a quiet hum to her voice. She was always counting, the leaves that tumbled in spirals from the wind chimes above her home, the notes in a bird's song, the number of steps from sunrise to the lake's edge. She didn't know why counting calmed her. It simply did. Around her danced artists, not painters or sculptors in the way we know them, but pattern weavers, birds whose feathers shimmered with shifting hues as they moved through light. The plaza where 3 spent her mornings was a kaleidoscope of their motions, each step sketching invisible lines that only others like them could follow. Today, their wings formed mandalas that rippled in and out like breath. As she watched, a cat, no, a bird, no, something in between, winked into the edge of her vision and vanished again. 3 blinked. Just sunlight. Probably. An elder weaver named 9 spiraled down next to her, trailing a ribbon of golden pollen. "What are you drawn to today, child?" she asked, voice rustling like reeds in breeze. 3 hesitated. Her eyes followed the dancers again. "The middle," she said at last. "The ones that fold 3 times, then 6, then back again." 9 stilled, not sharply, gently, like the way silence falls after a song. "The middle," she said at last. "The ones that fold 3 times, then 6, then 9, then back again." 9 stilled, not sharply, gently, like the way silence falls after a song. "And what do you see?" "I don't know," 3 whispered, "but it feels like it's trying to say something, like it's unfinished. Or maybe hiding." 9 tilted her head. "Many seek patterns. Fewer ask why they find them. That's what makes you a 3. A nearby artist trilled a new motif. A bright clash of notes that made 3 flinch. 9 stepped aside, and others joined the center in spirals, 7s, 2s, 4s. None followed the rhythm that pulled at her. It was there and not there, like a whisper under a waterfall. The skies dimmed slightly, sunlight caught in upper layers. Somewhere, a spiral tower began to chime its hour, long silver notes echoing outward. As always, 3 counted them, but this time, the 9th chime never came, above the city's perch. Between clouds, shaped like symbols and numbers, a shape twisted in on itself, a chamber no one knew of, not yet, but she had seen it, hadn't she, in dreams, in echoes. That night, 3 dreamt of birds with eyes like mirrors and feathers like doors, of numbers folding into each other until they vanished, and then of a shadow that didn't, a pattern not yet taught, a question not yet safe. She awoke to silence. The wind didn't whisper, the chimes didn't count, but in the plaza, the artists danced. Chapter 2. A Restless 3. 3 fluffed her feathers nervously beneath the soft glow of the early sun. The sky over the decimal realm was a wash of gold and pale blue. the distant trees whispering softly with the gentle morning breeze. The world felt alive, humming with quiet patterns invisible to most, except to a few, like 3. Her wings trembled slightly as she walked the dew-damp grass, her bright eyes scanning the colors that danced through the air, from the shimmering gold of sunlight to the deep blues in the shadows. She was a student here, a learner of hidden melodies woven through their world, but she often felt like she was chasing something just beyond her grasp. 3, came a calm voice, smooth like polished stone, rolling in a gentle stream. She turned to see 8 approaching. 8 moved with a grace that made the sunlight itself seem to pause. A tall, slender bird whose feathers caught the light in soft iridescence, shining with hues no one else seemed to wear. His eyes held the quiet wisdom of ages, yet also a spark of playful curiosity. "You've been restless," 8 said, his voice gentle but firm. "What is it you seek?" 3 hesitated. "I see patterns, but they slip away before I can hold them. Sometimes I feel the world is telling me a story, but it's written in a language I don't understand." 8 nodded, slowly, stepping closer to a twisting branch where a small cluster of shimmering leaves caught the morning light like tiny mirrors. "Patterns," 8 murmured, "are the music of existence. But not all melodies belong to this song alone. There are places where the music changes, a place beyond the counting of this realm." 3's heart fluttered. She had heard whispers, hints that some numbers, some truths were missing here, unspoken, invisible to most. "Do you think I could learn to hear that other music?" 3 asked, her voice a soft bird call. 8 smiled, a slow turning of feathers like petals opening in the sun. "Yes. But first, you must see what your eyes refuse to find, and hear what your heart tries to forget." As the wind stirred again, 3 looked up at the vast sky stretching endlessly above, feeling for the first time the pull of something beyond the numbers she had always known, a secret folded in the space between the stars. Chapter 3, The Realm of Eights. 3 watched 8's feathers shimmer in the morning light, then turned her gaze back to the sky. His question, "What comes before 1?" echoed softly in her mind, like the fading notes of a distant song. She perched quietly on a low branch, feeling the cool roughness of bark beneath her claws. Around her, the world was alive with tiny sounds. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of a singing bird, the gentle hum of the wind weaving through the tall grass. But inside her, something else was stirring, a silent whisper, asking questions that made her heart flutter with both wonder and unease. "Before 1?" she thought. "Is there something before the beginning?" The numbers she knew, 1, 2, 3, felt solid and certain, like the sturdy branches of the tallest tree. But now that certainty wavered. If 1 was the start, and what lay beyond? Could there be a shadow before the light? A breath before the first beat? Her eyes closed softly as she imagined stepping backward, past the first step, past the first number. She pictured a vast, endless space, not empty, but alive with shimmering possibility. a place where beginnings and endings tangled like threads in a golden tapestry. A warmth grew inside her chest, spreading slowly, like dawn's gentle glow. It was neither hot nor cold, but a soft pulse of life. A light too bright to look at directly, yet impossible to turn away from. Her mind stretched toward that light, feeling as if she floated on a breeze made of pure color and sound, a swirling dance of all the things she had ever known and all the mysteries waiting beyond. It was the glow of something infinite, a light without edges or end, shining from a place she could not name, but somehow felt deeply within her bones. "Is this what you mean?" she whispered to herself. "Is this what comes before one?" The bright light didn't answer, but it wrapped around her like a warm embrace, filling her with both awe and quiet fear. She felt small and infinite all at once, a single note in a song that stretched forever beyond the sky. Slowly, 3 opened her eyes. The world seemed sharper now. Every leaf, every feather, every whisper of wind, more alive than before. The question was still there, shimmering at the edge of her thoughts. But now it felt like an invitation rather than a puzzle. 8 watched her quietly from nearby, a knowing smile playing on his beak. "Some answers," he said softly, "are not found in counting or names, but in feeling the light that shines beyond." 3 nodded, her heart steady and her mind wide open. The journey had only just begun. Chapter 4, Beyond the Wall of Sevens. The light that had wrapped around 3 faded slowly, and when her eyes opened, she was no longer perched among the bright trees of the decimal realm. Instead, she stood on soft, cool earth beneath a sky painted in deep shades of violet and green. Colors strange, yet strangely familiar. Around her rose tall walls, made of shimmering sevens, 7 after 7, stretching in endless circles like the branches of an enormous cage. The walls pulsed gently, humming with a quiet power that made the air thrum. 3 reached out to touch one of the 7s. It felt smooth and hard, like polished stone, but alive. This was no ordinary barrier. It was the boundary of this world, the edge of what was known. She thought of 8, her teacher back home. But here, if 8 did not exist, did teachers? The air itself seemed tighter, more cautious, as if the world held its breath beneath the watchful eyes of the priests, silent figures draped in dark robes who moved like shadows among the twisting streets. The priests were the rulers here. They guarded the walls of 7s fiercely, whispering old rules and ancient warnings about the dangers beyond. They preached that nothing lay outside, that the walls were the whole world. Their voices carried the weight of fear and power. 3 felt a pang in her heart. Without teachers, how could anyone learn? How could anyone grow? She began to wander the realm, tracing the streets and silent courtyards. The world around her seemed familiar, yet strange, its patterns repeating endlessly, mirrored like reflections in a hall of mirrors. The buildings curved back upon themselves. The rivers folded into loops. The trees grew in fractal shapes, each echoing the other. Inside the walls of 7s, everything was contained, repeated, and known. But there was no room for wonder. no space for questions that reached beyond the walls. Then, in a quiet garden sheltered beneath a twisted tree, 3 found her, another 3, a young figure, small and curious, sitting cross-legged among the swirling patterns of the ground. This 3 looked up, eyes wide with silent longing. She had no teacher to guide her, no voice to answer her questions. She had learned the world through careful watching, piecing together the endless reflections of the 7s, but she did not know what lay beyond. 3 sat beside her, feeling the weight of this lonely knowing. "Do you see the walls?" 3 asked softly. The other nodded, tracing a finger along a pattern of 7s. "Do you wonder what is outside?" The young 3's eyes flickered with fear, then hope. "I do," she whispered. Together, they looked up at the endless ring of 7s. The wall held their world, but it could not hold their dreams. They met in secret places, under trees shaped like spirals, in quiet corners of mirrored courtyards, and by silent pools where the stars reflected in impossible patterns. The local 3 was curious, endlessly so. Her thoughts were full of shapes and echoes. She had noticed the same rock formation repeating in different parts of her realm. She had traced the shadows of cats, always 7 at a time, always flying in circles. She was a mirror without a voice to reflect her thoughts against. Until now. "You see the pattern too," she said to the visitor, her voice tinged with cautious wonder. "I do," said the traveler, nodding. "But I come from a place where patterns mean questions, not endings." The native 3 blinked. "Here, patterns are sacred. They are all we have. The priests say they are perfect, complete. They say the wall of 7s is the edge of being." The traveling 3 looked again at the sky. No stars beyond the walls, only a dim haze, as if the heavens themselves were unsure if they could exist outside this realm. "In my world, we are taught to ask, what comes before 1? The native 3's breath caught. "That's heresy here." Still, she leaned closer. Together, they began to trace the repeating loops of their world. With stones and twigs and chalk-like dust, they mapped the mirrored roads and rivers. And slowly, the local 3 began to see it. Not just the repetition, but the breaks in the repetition. Places where the pattern rippled, as if something unseen pressed against the realm from the outside. And always, always the wall loomed, perfect, silent, enclosing. One evening, as they sat on the steps of a hollow temple, grown from glimmering rootstone, the native 3 finally asked, "Do you think the wall is hiding something?" "I know it is," said the traveler with quiet certainty. Then came the priests. Their robes rustled like dry leaves. Their faces were veiled in mirrored masks, reflecting only what others expected to see. They did not speak at first. They only watched. Their presence was like a pressure in the air, a tightening of thought. Finally, one spoke. "No one goes beyond the wall. There is nothing beyond. The 7s are our gift, our cage, our truth." "But what if—" the local 3 began. "Silence," said the priest, his voice a distant echo. "You do not belong." "I know," she said. That's why I came." That night, they fled into the outer gardens, where the walls shimmered higher than the sky. The local three was shaken, but she didn't turn back. In the silence of the seventh garden, the traveler whispered, "You don't need a teacher. You are one." The native three stared at the traveler, the thought so new it barely fit inside her. They placed their hands together on the wall, and for a moment, just a moment, it flickered, not gone, but shaken. The wall remembered 8, and it trembled. Chapter 5, The View Above. The wind above the seventh garden was thin, dry, and sharp, like the memory of a forgotten thought. The visitor, decimal 3, light and flickering, shaped not of feathers, but of intuition, longing, and the memory of 8's question, "What comes before 1?" She looked at the wall one last time. It glowed faintly, pulsing in a rhythm that now felt almost familiar. Not final, just a beat in a larger song. Then she rose, higher than the root temples, higher than the mirrored trees. The octal realm stretched below like a map folded too many times. And beyond, her breath caught. It wasn't just one realm, not just one walled garden. It was an array, a lattice of repeating cages, each with its own center, each surrounded by walls of 7s, each unroofed, open to the sky, yet never daring to look upward, an endless pattern of almost worlds. Each convinced it was alone. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. She hovered there, momentarily overwhelmed, and then, with urgency, she folded her wings and dove. "I saw them," she told the local 3, her voice alight with wonder. "There are more realms, just like this, walls and 7s and gardens, but beyond them, nothing, but more of the same, stretching into every direction." The native 3's eyes widened. "So the wall isn't the end?" "No, it's a mirror, a loop, a cell. And it's not the only one." The native 3 sat in silence for a long time. The sky above her seemed different now, too small. "I have to tell them," she finally whispered. The visitor tried to warn her. They won't want to hear it. But it was too late. They gathered near the reflecting pools that morning. Local 3s, 4s, even a 2. The priestly 6 stood in their usual place, hands folded, silent. The native 3 stood tall. "There is more," she said, voice trembling but clear. "More beyond the wall. We are not the only realm. We are repeating." Murmurs rippled. A 5 scoffed. A 6 looked afraid. A priest stepped forward, his mirrored mask catching the light like a knife. "You have been misled," he said. "It's the truth," she insisted. "She saw it. I believe her. I felt it." "The patterns repeat. That means there is a pattern beyond this pattern." The priest raised a hand. "Insanity." His voice turned cold. "This is how we know 7 is the end of all reason." The crowd turned from her, eyes narrowed, feet stepped back. Some whispered. Others stared in silent disappointment, as if her words had smudged something beautiful. The native 3 tried to speak again. "Then how do you explain the bird?" But the sound was swallowed by a thick silence, heavier than any wall. None dared reply. That evening, alone by the spiral tree, she wept, not because they didn't believe her, but because now she knew, and knowing didn't fit back inside the world she'd always lived in. Chapter 6: The Heretic's Pattern. The wall had stopped being a boundary. For the native three, it had become a question. She no longer traced the mirrored trees. She no longer followed the priests. She wandered instead the margins, where shadows met the wall and light echoed strangely. The visitor, decimal 3, was still with her, quietly now, watching. This was not her realm, but it was her truth, reflected in another. Together, they began to draw. Not symbols, not letters, but the shapes that lived in the spaces between, patterns of the gardens, cycles of the mirrored blossoms, how the wall shimmered most near every seventh gate. They noticed how every mirrored path curved back, but never exactly. The native three remembered. She remembered that the spiral tree bore fruit only every 8th cycle, and yet no one had ever eaten them. What if it's a luck? She asked. And the pattern is the key? Decimal 3 nodded, her wings folded. It's always a pattern. So they traced, they counted, they whispered the silent beat between the walls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then nothing. Then again. 1, except not quite. It's like it's folded, the native three whispered. Like it tries to start over, but it isn't the same. She drew a spiral, one arm, then another, then connected them. It twisted upon itself, becoming not a spiral, but a helix. The visitor placed a feather at the center. There, she said, that's the space between 1 and 1 again. They sat in awe of what they'd drawn. It's not just repeating, said the native three. It's progressing. They hid the drawing beneath the roots of the spiral tree, etched in light and pigment from broken petals. But whispers grew. Some of the younger threes asked questions they weren't supposed to. A 5 disappeared after being seen sketching circles into a square. The priests tightened their ceremony. New rules emerged. No solo walks, no unanswered questions, no talk of the wall. They called her the pattern heretic. But still, in quiet corners, others came. Not many, but some. They saw the formula not as heresy, but as hope. That perhaps there was a song beyond the garden. That maybe 8 was not a number, but a silence they had never learned how to listen for. And in the shadows of the wall, where light broke faintly through slits unseen, the native three finally understood. The formula wasn't just a map. It was an invitation. Chapter 7, The 8th Silence. The gardens were quieter now. Not the peace of order, but the hush before a storm. Priests in saffron veils paced the mirrored paths with wary eyes, speaking only in threes. 3 on the left, 3 on the right, 3 in the front, 3 in the back, 3 forward for every 3 in reverse, chanting the names of the sacred numbers. 1 is being, 2 is difference, 3 is the student, 4 is stability, 5 is purpose, 6 is balance, 7 is completion, nothing beyond, and nothing beyond. But beneath the spiral tree, in secret, the heretic's formula still glowed, scratched into bark and soul. The native three had stopped attending the rituals. She no longer bowed when the priests chanted. She watched the clouds. They circled the skies inside the walls, never crossing them. Not because they couldn't, but because they had never thought to. The visitor whispered the formula in sleep, in rhythm with her heartbeat. The numbers pulsed. 3, 6, 9. Except here, it came out broken. 3, 6, 0. She no longer feared the 0. Others began to find her, not openly, in silence, in glances, in folded leaves slipped into her hand. A 4 brought her a petal shaped like an eye. A 6 hummed a boring tune that didn't repeat. Even a young one asked, "Is there really something past 7?" She didn't answer, but her silence said everything. And so the priests summoned her. They stood on the high dais in the center of the mirrored court, beneath the dome of holy sevens. Their faces were painted like cats, stoic, symmetrical, unreadable. The archpriest spoke in tones low and ringing. "You have carried a lie into sacred soil. You have drawn symbols that do not close. You have broken the cycle." She stepped forward, alone. I only opened the door. The silence that followed was vast. The priests answered not with logic, but with ritual. They stripped her of her name. They scratched the false number on her back, a shape they declared without center, without end. They exiled her not beyond the walls, but within them, cut off from the gardens, from others, from speech itself. She became a ghost in a realm that did not know death. But not all looked away. The visitor watched from the shadows, and with her, quietly, some of the octal children learned to draw lines in secret, not in defiance, but in curiosity. They didn't call it heresy. They called it listening. And when they looked at the wall of sevens, some of them began to wonder what made it a wall in the first place. Above them, the sky turned stranger. The clouds were higher than ever before. Some began to vanish into the blue. The priests said it was an omen. The children thought it was a promise. And somewhere in the silence between chants and numbers, an 8th pattern whispered back, not a number, not a word, but a direction. A direction. 3 again soon followed. Chapter 8, The Place Where Teachers Don't Exist. Time passed differently in the octal realm. It wasn't counted, only felt, like shadows crawling across walls that were never meant to move. The local 3 wandered, no longer followed by others. She'd become a quiet ripple in a pond that had frozen over. The priests said she was scratched, a number with missing edges, but she still remembered the visitor. The bird 3. 1 is being, 2 is difference, 3 is the student, 4 is stability, 5 is purpose, 6 is balance, 7 is completion. There were no songs for what came next. She often returned to the wall. It loomed tall and endless, a towering mass of carved 7s, repeating in perfect echo. 7, 7, 7, like a chant written into stone. Some said it wasn't a wall at all. But the sky itself, she knew better, because she had seen the one who came from beyond it. She had touched a feather that shimmered with a number that had no name here. And once you saw something like that, it didn't leave you. Even if everyone else tried to pretend it had never happened. One night, she dreamed of spirals, not the tight loops the garden trees made, but vast spirals winding upward, impossible and glowing. She reached toward them, and in the dream, she heard a voice. Not words, just a question. Where do questions come from when no one teaches you to ask them? She woke with her hands pressed into the grass, trembling. The light was already shifting. Elsewhere, hidden in the whispering reeds beyond the priest's reach, the decimal 3 was also watching. She had not seen 3 in many cycles, not since the light in the sky flickered strangely, too bright to be the sun, too silent to be a bird. She felt her teacher's absence like a missing note in a song. And she understood now why this realm felt like a puzzle missing its corners. There was no one to ask here, only rules. So she listened to the wind instead. She traced spirals in the sand. She folded the air around her wings and waited for the silence to crack. It did. Not loudly, not with thunder, but with a question whispered not in defiance, but in yearning. The local 3, the one who had been cast out, returned to the wall once more. This time not to measure it or fear it, but to draw something on its base. A single curve, then another, a spiral, unfinished. Below it, she scratched a mark, a number never taught in her songs. A whisper of something beyond completion. The wind caught it, and though the priests did not notice, the children did. They followed her, not because she taught them, but because she wondered aloud. And even in the place where teachers don't exist, the question had found a way to bloom. Chapter 9. Realms of Remembrance. They flew in silence. Decimal 3, wings wide, mind buzzing with what she'd seen above the wall. And octal 3, beside her, uncertain but trusting. They were leaving the octal dimensions behind, stepping out of the patterned cages and into the unknown. The walls of 7 faded behind them. Ahead, light. But before they could reach the source, the light fractured. Like a prism catching a sunbeam, it scattered, refracting across realms. First, they fell into green, an endless, soft plain. Light came from a single source at the center, suspended above the crossing of 2 great rivers that formed a perfect plus. Shadows split cleanly in 2. Everything was dual, light or dark, sound or silence, movement or stillness. They passed 2 beings, shaped like twins, who spoke in pairs of words. Yes, no, come, go, stay, fly. The decimal 3 bowed her head. Octal 3 only stared, unsettled. This is not home, she whispered. No, said the decimal, but it remembers one. Then the green faded to brown. They landed with a soft thump on spongy earth, where joyous laughter echoed through the air. Around them, creatures raced in spirals, tails wagging furiously, chasing what they could never catch. It was a world of fours, 4 seasons, 4 corners, 4-legged friends, bounding in pursuit of happiness they never questioned. Here, everything was stable, safe, circular, but stability came at a cost. They could not look up. Whenever Decimal 3 tilted her head to the sky, the dogs barked in warning. Down, down, eyes on the tail. She bowed politely and continued. Octal 3 lingered. They chase what they'll never reach, she murmured, because no one told them what might be caught, said Decimal 3, and took her hand. The ground shifted beneath them, and suddenly they stood in an orchard, vast, golden, strange. 12 great trees ringed a central root, each bearing fruit unlike the last. Some sweet, some sharp, some glowing faintly with inner light. Here the beings were spiders, robed in patchwork garb that shimmered as they moved. They carried scrolls, sang softly, and etched runes into bark. Octal 3 reached for a glowing orange pear. What's this? Truths, said a robed elder, not all of them ripe. Decimal 3 plucked a soft crimson fig, shaped like a spiral. They sat beneath the central root and ate together in silence. This place felt like a story long forgotten, and in that forgetting held peace, and then light. Not like the binary beam, not the glowing orchard, or the worn trails of the dogs. This was every color at once, folding around itself, spiraling inwards and outwards. It had no walls, it had no floor. They stood in a place of flowing lines, endlessly curving. Here, reality did not split, it converged. Figures moved through the curves, never stopping. Not walking, gliding. Thought first, shape second. Decimal 3 looked at her companion, who was quiet. This isn't a realm, said Octal 3. It's a thought, a motion, Decimal 3 added, a dream. Here they saw no beings, but paths, lines of reason, loops that closed around impossible truths and spiraled through impossible spaces. The lines did not resist change. They danced with it. They watched as one path circled around a central idea again and again, closer and closer, but never quite touching. Just like the question 8 had asked, what comes before 1? And suddenly, Decimal 3 understood. It wasn't an answer she needed. It was the space the question opened. Her wings pulsed with light. She closed her eyes and began to draw it. A shape that never ended, that turned in on itself, yet always grew. A spiral that wasn't sacred or profane, just true. Octal 3 reached out. Do you see it? She asked. Decimal 3 smiled. Yes. And now we return. They didn't fly back. They were carried by the curve of understanding, drawn by the shape they'd traced together. Chapter 0, The Gaze of Zero. The threes hovered at the heart of the spiral chamber, feathers quivering with a tremor that was neither fear nor excitement, but something older, an ancient beckoning from everywhere and nowhere. Around them, the braided rod lay silent, the looping spiral sketches faded from the marble floor, and the crack through which so many realms had passed was sealed once more. 3 felt a gentle pull, like the quiet tug of a distant tide. It came from the gray circle painted in soft silver at the center of the floor, the unspoken mark of 0, the rootless one. Slowly, she drifted down until she perched on the very edge of that circle. The moment her talon brushed its surface, the world around 3 sighed and stretched. Walls curved and doors dissolved, leaving her alone in a field of starlight. In that boundless expanse, Octal 3 sensed a presence both immense and intimate. It was the breath between heartbeats, the silence between song, the gleam of possibility before any pattern took shape. She realized then 0 was not a place, nor a number, but the space all numbers whispered into existence. 1,000 worlds bloomed before them, realms built on 2s and 3s, 8s and 11s, roots and ratios neither could name. Each world sang its own melody, its own rhythm, yet beneath them all lay the same silent pulse, the gentle rise and fall of 0's breath. Suddenly, they saw through all those worlds at once. They felt her own tales dissolve into threads of light. Their heartbeat slow to the pace of creation itself. From the smallest spark of binary fields to the grand loops of the golden realm, every pattern wove into a single tapestry, 0's tapestry. She realized every quest, every climb past 7, every spiral of 9 and cross of 0's had led to this living moment, the unbroken now of infinite potential. In that timeless breath, there was no beginning and no end, only the endless dance of possibility, new worlds unfolding, old ones folding back into mist, all guided by the silent gift of the void. 3 felt 0's gentle question echo within her. Will you merge, become the doorway for countless folds? With a voice both her own and all worlds, she answered the only answer, yes. Light blossomed around her, soft and radiant. She felt herself expand beyond shape, beyond thought, becoming the hush between notes, the space between breaths, the seed of every realm. And then, as dawn's pale glow began to reach the sealed spiral chamber, 3 reappeared among her friends, no longer merely a learner, but the living hand of 0 itself. Her feathers shimmered with starlight, and her eyes held the depth of uncounted worlds. 8 knelt beside her, awe lighting her gaze. 3, what have you seen? 3's voice rang like wind through ancient trees. I have seen every pattern, felt every breath, and understood the rootless 0. We are all 0's doorway. Every choice we make, every world we visit, we carry its quiet promise forward. They bowed their heads, each feeling the hush of possibility within their own hearts. Inside, the spiral chamber's walls glimmered with new glyphs, lines of silver that pulsed faintly, like invitations to realms yet undiscovered. 3 became another 8. As they departed together, the world felt softer, more alive. Every stone and leaf seemed to hum with the silent gift of 0, reminding them that beyond every wall, every number, every shape, there waited a breathless pause, a void full of all things yet to come. And in that quiet anticipation, they carried 0 with them, stepping forward into infinity.
From the author. I've mentioned frequently the adoration I gained for Asimov as a young reader. Among the first of his works that I read was The Gods Themselves, which is a prime inspiration of this short novel. Not to forget mentioning the various interpretations of flat worlds and Nightfall's revealed hidden worlds. I first read The Gods Themselves as a very young Christian, slowly being indoctrinated into atheism, not only by my paternals, but by education too. An indoctrination that never quite completed, though caused much heretical wandering. Thanks be to God the more for repentance. I tried to write it to inspire young mathematicians, though no doubt many of the concepts will only become clear nearing late teens. With the correction God showed me, 1 over 1 equals 1 plus 0, where 0 cannot be nothing, which cannot exist, but pretty much breaks all our math. While called quantumly random or undefined by atheists, it is infinite in potential and clearly molded by God's will alone. A part of God, almost as vital as Jesus or you, but more like the sometimes hidden connection between. I used GPT 4.0 to complete this, including a full rewrite, in part to archive the storytelling abilities of the rapidly developing AIs, in part because I'm flooded with ideas but little writing talent, in part because the pattern I've found, been shown by God, and called the fractal of sneeze, seems to be rarely understood by humans, at least the ones I try to explain it to, with rare exception. Shout out, though, the trucker who never left, Ottawa. For details, see my homepage, http://sneezer.icu, or Google Fractal of Sneeze, Speaker Sneezer.